right, guys, let me get comfortable. Let me get comfortable. This is gonna be the best interview. Oh wait, this isn't an interview. Hello everybody. I wanted to do some talking from in bed because we're so exhausted on Drift Week, and this is more of like a public service announcement. So, after lots of drifting a Corvette myself over the past 5 years, owning 5 different Corvettes, running Texas Street Legal and also Pro-Am with lots of different Corvettes, and now doing basically Corvette Week in my Corvette jacket, which should be here, but it's not, and doing Drift Week, I have learned something about Corvettes that I think all Corvette owners that want to drift should know. It's probably a good thing about Corvettes in general. I'm not going to beat around the bush too much. I think that long tube headers are probably ruining drift Corvettes and Corvettes in general. And the problem is a bunch of folds. So one, we're going to talk about the cascading effect of like a modification leading to other modifications because long tubes work so well. And then the second one is the heat problem inside of a Corvette and what it does. So when I say reliable, in Texas Street Legal, the cars such as Danny Sufi's and a bunch of other cars, they basically run non-stop, you know, as many laps as the people can do, including on Drift Week. He also did Drift Week and everything, and they don't really have many mechanical failures. We also have Ben Crawford. He had, even though he beat the living bejesus out of that car, it was pretty darn reliable. And then Chandler had a super reliable one. And there's just a bunch of drivers that have super reliable ones. And then on Drift Week, there's a bunch of guys that have really reliable ones, including we just had the problem of I sold the blue one to Luke Fink, and then Travis on Drift Week, he bought his from Kevin Gork, one of my drivers. The juxtaposition of the cars with headers, like long tubes and stock headers, is crazy.
Drift Week 5 would like to thank these amazing sponsors, including BC Racing Custom Coilovers that have been with us from the beginning, the most supportive coilover company in the United States, ECU Master USA, who is also on this trip and has been supporting these trips from the beginning, NK Wheels, who we absolutely love, and always I run RPF1, so thank you guys. Drift HQ, that brings the support van. We could not do this without you guys. Vapetasia, who is not only on this trip driving with us, but also supporting the trip. A new sponsor, Heatwave Visuals. They support us with awesome eye protection and make rad stuff, including the beanie I'm wearing in these videos. And WhatMonstersDo.com, who makes great content. They support Lone Star Drift. They support our Japan content. You can go and use the Ebisu discount code on their website for a percentage off. Let's get back to the content.
What happens is with a Corvette is you have a lot of heat problems. And the cars typically don't break the engine. They don't break the transmission. They don't break the diff. The clutches maybe, or the torque tubes, but those really don't see many failures on Drift Week. I don't think anybody's really having clutch or torque tube failures. Out of all of the drifting we've done, I think we had 1 torque tube failure in 5 Drift Weeks, and that was on Matt Field's car. So those things are not being taken out. What's being taken out on Drift Week and these other things is electrical system in Corvettes. And the electrical systems are typically breaking down, 1, because GM didn't build a great electrical system in the cars, but 2, the heat is intense in these cars. And the long tubes specifically in the cars, like in mine, when I had long tubes in it, you could literally almost hear the battery boiling when you turn the car off. So the battery gets incredibly hot, the wiring gets incredibly hot and brittle, and it starts to fall apart. All the connectors and stuff start to fall apart. And these are CAN bus cars for the more modern ones. So if you have any type of electrical problem, they fail in the CAN bus loop. So they start to take out the entire car, where the car will do a no start, or even worse, which is really, oh, my back is killing me. What's even worse almost than the no start, because when you have a no start, you can actually diagnose the car. It's the intermittent problems of you clutch kick the car, and then the car kind of kicks out for a split second and then turns back on and then continues. So when you're in tandem, you can't really tandem confidently because the car could get you killed, kind of thing. Now, why I think it's long tubes is because if you have a stock header car, they just don't, those cars don't typically see the same problems on Drift Week, and they're incredibly reliable next to the long tube header cars with electrical stuff involved. And that's the biggest thing I see the difference between the cars. If you have a stock header car, the wiring is in better shape. You're not having so many CAN bus problems. You're not having alternator problems. You're not having all these crazy problems that's taking out the Corvettes. And the Corvettes, even when they're not running, they're still making it between track to track, and they're doing stuff, but they're having taillight failures, they're having relay failures, they're having alternator failures, they're having intermittent start, intermittent running. And they're having a lot of the time the fans themselves, the relays melt. They're having just all kinds of problems, and it's all related to too much heat in the engine bay. And in most other cars, you're not having wiring harness problems of the same kind. So if you're going to do a drift event, like a drift Corvette, the first part, this is kind of a two-part thing, is keep the factory headers if you can. The Texas Street Legal rulebook kind of required that, and because of that, the Corvettes in Texas Street Legal, which is our Lone Star Drift limited class, the cars are just naturally super reliable because of that. And I was wondering what makes, what's the big difference between all these cars? So that's one portion, is you're not having electrical failures in the non-long tube cars. And then secondly, which is kind of a cascading effect, is if you have to retain the long tubes, one, all you can really do is maybe a tune and maybe an exhaust, but you can't really do a cam and a head package or a built motor or all those things because you're really bottlenecked by those headers, which means the transmission's going to see less abuse, the axles, the torque tube, the clutch, the transmission, everything else in the system is going to see less abuse, the mounts for things and everything else. And you're not going to see the torque tube failures, you're not going to see all those different failures unless you're just high mileage car that, doesn't have a lot of maintenance done to it. So you're just not going to have all the drivetrain failures that you might in a car that either has or doesn't have long tubes. I already forgot which way that went. Generally, the Corvettes are so strong in the drivetrain because it's a T56, because it's a big OEM diff, LSD, which is really good, because it's an LS motor that's really good. Those components don't generally break, so even if you did have more power, you're not going to see a lot of breakage, but it keeps it from doing that. And also, if you have the long tubes, on some cars, if you have factory cats and everything, they seem to hold a lot of heat and they kind of overheat the car. I'm not sure if that's really what's going on with the Corvettes. Once you upgrade an oil cooler and a separate power steering cooler and you get a good radiator in there with good fans, the cars seem to cool pretty darn well. It's just the factory cooling stack is really, really bad. So even after you update that stuff, if you have long tubes, you're still having the long tubes themselves bake everything in the engine bay. Now, all this might not be 100% correct because I'm not a mechanic and I don't run a race team with all these cars back to back all the time, but I have had 5 Corvettes. I have had long tubes on them. I have been around more than a dozen or 2 dozen Drift Week Corvettes, plus my Texas Street Legal cars, plus all the other ones. And just as an observation, it seems like the long tubes are the divider between whether or not a Corvette will have problems down the line and how the electrical system will be in the car, and how much of a good time you're gonna have with drifting and a Corvette. And I would say the biggest downside of a Corvette, because they have great steering, they have great everything. The biggest downside of a Corvette is simply going to be the cooling and electrical problems because of the cooling. And most of these cars, remember, they're not that old. They're 2006s because you don't want a 2005 to 2013 or something like that. That's way newer than most of the cars we're dealing with, but it is one of the GM products that's in a transitional period where they have a key that you don't turn like that. So it has to be inside the car. The car has to see that key and hear it over whatever wireless system it has to then do a full CAN bus loop and complete all that for the car to be happy and start and even engage the starter. The Corvettes themselves seem very temperamental to battery voltage. So if your battery is low on voltage, it's not going to sit there and try and go rah, 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 rah and attempt to start. It's simply going to give you a no start where you just press the thing and you might hear one click and nothing else of a relay clicking, but you're not going to get the car attempting to start whatsoever. And then if you have low voltage, all the systems in the car are not going to play nicely and the car is not going to run well because your throttle body is electrical. It's not a cable actuated one. Your throttle body, your foot pedal, your gas pedal is electric. obviously all the ECM and BCM stuff and all the ABS systems and everything else all have to see the correct voltage, or else they're not going to work correctly. And a lot of us come from older cars where as long as you're getting somewhat of a right voltage, the car is going to attempt to work, even if it's not going to run great. You might have a crappy running car, but at least it's going to turn on and let you diagnose stuff and listen to things and listen to the injectors and watch fuel pressure and everything else we do, whereas the Corvette is going to do nothing. And again, because it's CAN bus, if you have a, again, I'm not a mechanic, but if you have a electrical problem and it sees the throttle body is not passing through the CAN bus signal, it's not going to get to the next item, and then the foot pedal and everything else, and it's going to start just throwing codes off your OBD2 that everything in the system is a problem. You'll be reading a bad foot pedal, you'll be reading bad throttle body, and the system, even though it should be where you can diagnose things really well with an OBD2 scanner, it actually backfires where you can't diagnose anything because the CAN bus system is taking out everything. And that's my experience. I'm not a mechanic. So, okay, I won't ramble anymore, but I just wanted to share with you guys that do not do long tubes unless you want lots of electrical problems in a Corvette and you don't mind the car becoming unreliable. If you do want ultimate, super reliable car where the car works all the time on drift week and is super happy, keep factory headers. A tune is great, wakes the car up a lot. I've had multiple Corvettes. They're plenty fast enough with a tune. My drift week, like, you're gonna make the car faster with a set of tires that are really good, like with the Velino C's or something like that, you know, like a grippy tire, than you will adding long tubes and all the other junk on a Corvette, because an LS2, and especially an LS3 car, makes plenty of power to get everything done. Okay, that's it. Thank you. Goodbye. I hope that helps.